You should show respect. The other man is stealing, he's killing you. Why do you have to show respect to him? In Brazil, what happened? If the young man called Suleiman was not brave enough to slap somebody, do you think we would have known what was going on? No.
For me, it was very reminiscent of the 70s during a champion's time, which were really bad times, where we all slept at the petrol station. So that's indication that, you really need to get up and talk about it, because we cannot, as a nation that deserves so much more, come to this level.
I'm working like a bull and I'm paying my taxes. The government got to work like a bull as well and make sure that my road is fixed, that I have electricity, that I have water. That is their job. It is not for me to tell the president how to fix the economy. If he didn't know how to fix the economy, why did he run for office?
And as you can see, they are holding placards with various inscriptions and are lamenting over poor governance, general economic hardship, and widespread corruption in the Mahama-led government. And now, after some few speeches, the group is now moving onto the streets.
Hi, and welcome to this special episode of Reflections GH. First of all, I would like to wish all mothers a happy Mother's Day. God bless you all for all you do. We have convened this special episode because we want to talk about Mother Ghana, from whom we have all come. It is no secret that Ghana has endured a host of civil protests in its history, particularly since the inception of multi-party democracy in 1992. Notable among them are the Kumipreko demonstrations of the 1990s and the Occupy Ghana movement's public protests a few years ago. It is also no secret that whenever they have been held, protests have challenged existing political and socioeconomic structures which a large portion of the population believe need to change. We are once again witnessing a moment where citizens are rising to challenge the government based, for the most part, on the government's own promises and partly on a socioeconomic regime most people argue is not sustainable. Of course, this is in the context of COVID-19, which has threatened the livelihoods of many people, millions of people around the world, including in Ghana. The global as well as the national impact of the pandemic cannot be understated. And I would argue the pandemic's impact has precipitated the current wave of protests. However, it is also noteworthy that the government, many of whose members have been involved in past national protests, like we saw in that video, and demonstrations, have not been very supportive of citizens' legitimate rights to dissent. And this is not new. Historically, there have been some tolerance for public protests. There has also often been several instances where governments, for instance, and their agents have resisted citizens' attempts to use protest as a vehicle for drawing attention to the country's challenges. For instance, it is widely reported that the Kumipreko demonstrations suffered, protesters of the demonstrators from Kumipreko suffered many instances of physical violence at the hands of security personnel in 1995. So this is just an example, right? There's also documented evidence of repression of protests and civil disobedience throughout Ghana's 29-year democratic experiment. Successive governments have often offered several reasons for repressing citizens' rights to speak up, typically citing, for instance, public health and safety concerns, as well as the threat to social order. These are also true in the current iteration of the protest, where the government, through the security agencies, has sought to prevent protesters from gathering in person. Protesters have, on the contrary, maintain that the threat is not to order itself, but to the old order which institutes and perpetuates an unjust socio-economic regime. They argue that they are not anarchists who simply want a complete and total demolition of social structures. They simply want a system that works. One thing we have noticed based on social media interactions and observation is that this group of protesters is not a monolithic set. And this is very important, particularly for this conversation and for us here at Reflections GH. They come from different religions, socioeconomic class, political affiliations, and age groups. A group of people who are united by their kinship to Ghana. This is also the reason why we at Reflections GH are interested in asking questions about these protests. We are convinced that although there is always that potential for such protests to be hijacked by political opposition agenda, ultimately the motive is not political. The questions we want to ask in this regard are twofold. We want to interrogate the relevance of protests in Ghana, but we also want to ascertain the plan and purpose of these fix the country protests that we are currently witnessing. To help shed the light on these issues, we are absolutely delighted to have guests with us, a couple of whom have previously been on the show, in the persons of, in no particular order, and we have Bashira Tukamal Muslim. Bash is here, great. We also have Oliver Baka Vomawa, who is one of the conveners of Fix the Country protest. And we have, let me make sure, Eche Sekanku is also here with us to shed light on these very important issues. Welcome. So we are so excited to have you. Welcome to the show, and thank you for coming. I also want to acknowledge my guest, my co-host, Amanda. Is Amanda still on? Amanda will join us in a minute, but Amanda is also our regular co-host who will join us in a bit. Welcome to all of you, and thank you once again for joining us. I want us to jump straight into the questions, and I want us to talk about. So first of all, I want to pose the first question to Oliver. Oliver, you and this is specific to you because I do know, and as we all do know, that you are one of the champions of these protests, and so I want to know what the origins of personally, right? Your interest in civil disobedience, interest in using protest, for instance, as a vehicle for getting things out there. Where does it come from, and what do you hope it leads?
Thank you for the question. I must also point out that Bash, who is with us, is also one of the conveners, and I'm very extremely happy to have Bash in the conversation as we build this up. It's a difficult question, I think political awakening generally, as you put it, has different phases, right? Like I remember I made a whole post about what it means to be political, because everything is political, right? But the ways in which you move and engage with politics shifts over time. And as a young person, I was introduced into the political process pretty early by my folks. I remember as I would go to class very, very young, and I would notice, as a young person, teachers would ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up in the future? And I would say, I want to be president. And I said this with a lot of mischief at the time because it made my teachers so uneasy. It wasn't the kind of profession now, profession that we're usually getting from students, and which would be doctor, lawyer, that sort of thing. And I like the fact of that mischief and the way in which it destabilized their reactions to it. But generally, in terms of how protests can be unleashed, and I perhaps shy away from using the language of protest, but much more contentious politics can be used to achieve systemic justice and also to reform the way we engage with the structures of governance. I think it's come from a lot of learning, and also working for and within government. So for context, I worked as a constitutional researcher for the Constitution Review Commission in Ghana, and I worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat as well before I resigned. And my exposure to those spaces sort of woke me up to the myth of a government, right? The idea of government was a myth. That the idea that there were people who knew what they were doing and had their, excuse my French, shit together, they didn't exist. So that kind of wanted me to create a narrative, a different way of thinking about how people can be brought into the political process differently, I think.
Thank you so much. And I'm interested in all of this, the experience. So if I were to summarize what you said, right? Of course, there's a lot in there, but one of the big things is that your experiences as a Ghanaian, but also as someone who has been able to has been privy to some of these things, right? And being in political spaces, diplomatic spaces, know how government works, right? Has sort of awakened you to the current moment, right? And the current moment we'll talk about more in detail here. Particularly, I want us to talk about general observations about civil disobedience, resistance, protest in Ghana, right? How does that relate to our current conversations around? Because there's a lot of talk recently, but I mean, this is not even the first time, but it has awoken again recently. This culture of silence, right? We talk about this culture of silence, and if we were to kind of invoke certain general observations about civil disobedience and resistance and so on, with regards to the current conversation about the culture of silence, what would that be? And if you don't mind, I want to start with you on this one, Bash. If you heard me, I know you.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Great.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. I think in your introduction, you actually gave an account, which shows that this is not the first time citizens are actually demanding and also asking government to be accountable for their stewardship, because they campaign on messages, and it is based on those messages that citizens decided to repose their trust in them. Apart from that is the issue about how this same government has been one of the groups that has on several occasions in past times, even before they ever came into government in Ghana, engaged in diverse forms of civil disobedience. You know, notable amongst them, which you mentioned, is the Kumi Prekon. They were key amongst the group that were part of the Occupy Ghana movement, and also the Let My Vote Count Ghana. And all these different groups had an agenda, and that agenda, they termed this as a development agenda that sought to let government be transparent and be accountable to the good people of Ghana who have reposed their trust and were paying their taxes. And in return, these taxes were what was used to keep our government officials in office. About the culture of silence, this is actually not my first time engaging in a march or a protest and having difficulties with Ghana Police Service. This is about my third or fourth. Some years back in the TUC itself tried having a march, and it was tough because government insisted that it would not allow that march to happen. That was around 2012. Apart from that was a drop that chamber match that we all witnessed in 2018. Then the hijab is an identity movement in 2019, which was a movement that I am the convener, and I am the one who was leading everything about that group. And for that, I have more of the experiences because I was directly involved in everything, especially to deal with the security agencies in letting us march. And for that, when we wrote the letter to the regional police commander, we were invited. And I was out of town. I needed to ask someone, the one who delivered the letter, to go see the police. And they insisted until they see me, they wouldn't allow it. So I had to travel to town, stop whatever I was doing out of the country, came with the first flight from Nigeria to Ghana, then went to the Ghana Police Command. When we got there, we had to wait for more than 3 hours before they attended to us. And the sad part of it was when they called us to the office of the regional commander, everything that was being done and said in that office indicated that they are not interested in allowing us to enjoy our rights as citizens, And it was sad because some of the words that were used against us, for instance, for a police person to tell me that this is not Saudi Arabia, if you have issues around hijab, go to Saudi Arabia. Then the regional commander was bold enough to tell me that they cannot sit in this country and watch some people who have been financed by Saudi Arabia to come and disrupt the peace of the nation because of some religion or the other. And the man was trying to bully me and the other people I was with, and realized that it was not going to work. So in the end, they told us that they would not allow us to march until they have a word from the office of the National Chief Imam, as if the Chief Imam is the only citizen who has the right to direct the Muslim community to march. Thankfully, we had established a working relationship with our office. So we called, and the personal assistant of the Chief Imam wrote a letter and sent the letter to us. We printed the letter and gave it to them, and they said, no way, they have to see somebody. Then the PA of the National Chief Imam picked a motorbike and joined us at 5:59 p.m. By which time the people were insisting, the police officers were insisting there was no way they would allow us to march. When the man got there, they asked us to excuse them. And we did tell the man in Hausa that there was no way we were backing off. If he goes there and compromises, we are not letting down the people of the Zongo communities. He went there, they tried to persuade him, they did everything, and he insisted that the match will come on and came out. That was when they knew that they could not do anything. But sadly, when we were leaving, the commander looked at me in the face and told me, don't dare go out to march, because when we meet you there, you wouldn't like it. So I told him that it is either they march with us or we will march without them. So we will meet at Nima at 8 o'clock a.m. So we went to Nima. We were there, we started the march and everything. We got to busy internet and we heard the police sirens. We saw quite a number of police vehicles and policemen surrounding the group. And they insisted we didn't have a permit. They insisted we didn't write officially to the police. And then we had copies of the letters we had written and everything. So we showed them. And I told them that the law did not say we take permission from the police. The law said we notify the police. They had no right to stop us. And if they really wanted to stop us, they knew what to do to stop us. Then they were threatening us. Meanwhile, there were some members of parliament in our midst on the march. Before they could realize, all the Zongo guys came around and surrounded the police. Then they started panicking. That was when they said, okay, if that is the case, we should go and march. And then after that, the leaders of the group should come and meet them at the Nima police station. So you can see clearly that it is not like government officials or leaders in Ghana do not know what our rights are. It is like people wanting to intentionally stress Ghanaians when they ask for what is their right, which is not fair. Because when people who have been beneficiaries of the system and have ensured the system worked are the ones who use the same system to frustrate the other citizens who have actually been the one who have risked their lives to go and queue, to register, to leave their work, their time and everything, and then also went to queue at the polling stations to vote for them and ask for nothing except to vote for them based on the promises they made to them. That is dishonesty. That is not fair. And that is something that Ghanaians now, we are not ready to accept. Because the same way you trusted us and came around campaigning to us is the same way we are only asking you to let us do what the Constitution says we can do as citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. This is a very vivid example, right? One quick question, and I will direct this to Oliver. Oliver, mostly because of our previous conversation just minutes before, and what I do know about you and what you're doing with protest. is this, and this is going to sound more, I'm not a journalist, but it's going to sound like a question a journalist will ask you, right? Is this backed by the NDC?
For the life of me, I didn't even think this was what we were going to go.
I had to ask because I mean I think I know what the answer is, but I also don't know. So
I have been saying consistently that in all interviews I've managed to avoid yes or no answers, and then I'm wondering at which point Ghanaian media are going to realize that I never give yes or no answers. You have succeeded. It's a complete no. Like, no, we haven't received any funding from anybody. There was an attempt to try to raise some funds through GoFundMe. I think it was about $500 raised on there. We hasn't gotten far yet. We haven't even used any of that money. So far, all of the processes, for instance, we filed in court, came from my personal pocket. And so questions around funding are going to come up in the way we make this sustainable. But we have seen examples of how grassroots funding has been able to make a movement survive and a call for action survive. Maybe that becomes the approach in which makes this sustainable and also legitimately grassroots led and owned, hopefully. But we have no political funding from any of the political parties or any established institution whatsoever.
Great. And I like I said, that's what I thought it was, but it's also, I thought it was also a legitimate question. I mean, it wasn't part of the plan to ask this question, but because, and this is from my own interactions, right, throughout this past week, right, my interactions with people, it seems to suggest you guys have gathered all these NDC people and you are about to bash the government, and I was like, I don't know anything about any of this stuff, but I just needed to be sure from insiders that this is not something, and this is also a legitimate concern, right? We've seen this over the years since the 1990s, where it becomes very political, not in the general sense, but in the party political sense of the word, right? That we see, opposition parties tend to take advantage of real legitimate issues to kind of, poke their noses in there to say, okay, well, all of this is happening because they are a bad government and they are failing, right? I just wanted to make sure that that's not what is happening here. And so thank you for that response. But I want to move. I heard that we have Dr. H.S. Ikanku on audio, and I want to ask him, particularly because I know this is also his area. And so I want to ask H.A., what is the role of protest in a democracy like the one we have in Ghana? If you can hear me. Is Eche with us still? I was told he was here on audio. I don't know if he's here with us still. All right, we'll come back. It looks like, do we still have him? This is very important, so definitely walk back to this issue.
Can you hear me?
Okay, great. I can hear you now.
Okay. Just a second, please, Doctor.
Did you hear my question? Should I repeat it? Or?
Yeah, please. Yeah, if you could kindly go over the question. Yeah.
Yes. So the question we wanted to talk about, discuss is what is the role of protest? So given all of this background, and particularly in the current moment that we're in, and obviously not distinct from all of the stuff that's happened, in Ghana's democracy, we've seen several protests and so on. What would you say the role of protest in a democracy is? A democracy like Ghana's, right? What role does it play, or does it have a role, and what is it?
Okay, thank you very much. And since this is the first time I'm speaking, I'm going to do a Ghana thing and say good evening to you and to everybody. And thanks to Reflections GH for having me, and good evening to the panelists, the rest of my co-panelists as well. Oliver and I know we have a route, a different route of connection, so I'm sure we'll try to connect at some point. But hi to him and the rest of the panelists, and to Kwame and Kakari and everybody else. These protests are very important because they help to satisfy some of the norms, the basic norms and expectations of democracy. And there is definitely, and it's definitely an avenue or an opportunity for us to begin to think about how these social movements or protest movements contribute to achieving certain democratic norms or certain democratic ideals, which is actually the eventual outcome that we want from a democracy. And since that is the political system that we have. And what are those ideals in terms of participation, in terms of mobilization, in terms of accountability, and then in terms of responsiveness? These are some of the roles that social movements or protest movements could play. The fact of the matter is that democracies exist for the people, and so if we want democracies to serve the needs of the people, then they've got to be responsive, and they've got to provide that space and that opportunity for people to make their voices heard, and for people to be able to express their views in whatever way that they want. And establishing a protest constitutes one of those legitimate ways for people to express or to be able to contribute or participate in the business of a democracy. So definitely it helps in a very major way to make sure that we are fostering and deepening democracy, to make sure that people do not feel that they are being left out or they are being left behind. And if they feel that way, then there is every reason for them to organize. There's every reason for them to mobilize. There's every reason for them to protest, and there's every reason for them to constitute themselves into a movement to make sure that their voices or those demands that they do want to hear from the government is being met. So I think that if there is that understanding that it only contributes to the process of democracy and helps in achieving serving the needs of people, right? Or serving the needs of people, then I think there'll be less antipathy and less suspicion around these protest movements.
Thank you so much. And I want to ask you this next question, right? Because it's related to, and I also do know that because you are a professor at GIJ, that you are the expert on this panel, particularly just based on your experience. What is the role? We talk about the media a lot, particularly when we talk about protests, because if you think about, and media in a broad sense, right? But if you think about even how the message of protests get out there and the framing of protests and the way that protests are, even the organizing of protests, right, becomes a failure or not based on the way that the media handles it. So what role does the media play in relation to the general culture of resistance in Ghana, as is articulated to your previous response?
Okay. It's a good question, mostly because the media are such a central institution in the society generally, in democracy generally, but especially also when it comes to these protests, because they are the wire or the conduit through which people get to learn about these protest movements. And you use the word framing. The way in which they frame those movements, you go a long way to the success of those movements. Back in the 80s, there was this scholar called Todd Gitman who wrote on the protest movements of the left and the role that the media played, in shaping people's understanding of those protest movements, the responses that they got, and in fact, their overall success. That was a very seminal piece in contributing to studies on protest, the intersection between protest movements and the media. And it's a seminal piece, when you, in my line of work, which really I'm into media framing of stuff or issues. So, Todd Gitlin really brought that out. And he said one thing. He said, the movement, the media's framing of it can be constituted in several ways. either they malign the movement, either they malign the movement, or sometimes they tend to mock it. Yeah, sometimes they tend to mock it, and sometimes they tend to delegitimize the movement, and sometimes through the media's framing, it also legitimizes them as well. So the media is very central, actually, and you can see that it's amazing. You can see that play out before our very eyes, in terms of the framing of it. Are these NDC folks? So there's the politicization. Are these just disgruntled people who do not know what they want, they just have time? Or are these just troublemakers who just want to destabilize the system? So there's a lot of framing around this whole stuff, and the way the media treats it. Has it been mainstreamed? Are they trying to delegitimize the movement through their own framing of it? I don't think so far that has happened, because it looks like the mainstream media has taken it up. And believe it or not, during the week, one of the big agenda-setting programs in Ghana, both Good Evening Ghana by Paul Adumosu and Bernard Avle, made this their topical issue of discussion. The treatment of it, though, is different, in terms of making sure that they are treating the movement in a very fair way. So if you watch those two, you begin to get an idea. And this is very important because it shapes people's thinking about the movement and whether they will accept the movement or whether their demands are legitimate or not. And you see it happening at the very, very, very early stages of it. So it's kind of amazing, like it's happening in real life. So the media is very, very, very central, very key to how this really pans out. And I think that it's early day yet. I'm trying to study this, actually, do some study on it. I remember when Occupy Flagstaff House came up and Occupy Ghana came up, I actually supervised a dissertation on that particular topic, media coverage and protest movement, the case of the Occupy Flagstaff. So I do have some history with it, and it will be interesting to study how this particular protest movement also pans out and how the media contributed in the shaping of this particular movement.
Thank you so much. And I know Amanda, my co-host, is also on here. Amanda, if you can hear me, and I want to ask for your observations, right? Still on this issue of media, right? What are your observations about the way that not simply the protests that are happening right now, but in general, right? What are your observations about the way the media has either supported or inhibited protest, and for what reasons that typically happens? If you can hear me.
Said a number, and coming from the background of sociology or social sciences, right now we've come to observe that the media is one of the major forces of socialization and information dissemination in the world. And even in Ghana, a number of people prefer their news from various media outlets. So so far, I think when we categorize it, there have been a lot of discussions, especially with the Six Ghana campaign on most radio stations. I work about Kikos, and you hear it in local languages and English languages. So I think it's been given a lot of attention, and so it's sending the message across. Social media is also doing the most, like there's a lot of attention and all. And I hope it continues to be this way, where it's been discussed as something that is a national issue and not just partisan, because we've had instances where the media has also been a reason why people refuse to accept certain messages. One critical thing that we've always been complaining and now is calling for the need for the media to be trained on issues of gender, for instance, is how they describe issues of rape. So because of that, people tend to normalize gender-based violence and all. So for this time around, I think the media is doing so well in how they are handling it, and I hope it continues like that. I also hope that the conveners of the Fix the Country campaign are able to reach out to the local platforms where the languages are not going to be in English alone. I know there are there are other local radio stations that are trying to discuss these issues, but whether their conveners are also engaging at those levels for people to really understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, I think it'll be very helpful. So.
Great, thank you so much. And at this point, I wanna bring in Oliver and Bash, basically mostly because there are questions in here. So there are some questions in the comments that I think Oliver and Bash can help us respond to. I think I saw one here. How do we make protests yield positive results? So this is from Mark. Mark says, how do we make protests yield positive results and drive development? Bash and Oliver, what do you think? How do we do that?
Maybe I'll let Bash take this one first, and then I can come in. Or am I putting you on the spot, Bash?
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay, good.
So I think it comes in a number of ways. But before I go on with it, I'd like to make a quick comment on the media bit. I mean, having been a journalist myself, having practiced for some time before leaving the media space to be a unionist full time, I think that one of the major problems we have with some of the media houses is not that there's no willingness among some of the workers. The problem is who is determining what goes and what does not pass. So you have journalists covering the story and doing nice feature articles and writing the reports and everything, but ends up on the desk of someone who says this cannot pass, and then it's that. In the TV and the radio space, it does happen too. Last minute, I have been on a show where about 5 minutes to the time, they just said no, it cannot pass again, so they canceled it outright. So I think our discussions of the media, we should we have to do a deeper discussion maybe someday about the situation of the media and how we can also help, in changing that dynamics of issues that are there. Having said that, making protests yield results and driving development comes in diverse ways. One, access to information is very key. You need to let people understand what you are trying to do. Even if you do not get the ultimate change that you wish for, the fact that you have sensitized people have been educated on their rights, people have their knowledge base have been built, and that's going to affect people's decision in future election is a key achievement that we cannot quantify that, and I'm not sure any research has been done to that effect. How protesters and how movement have affected, government. Like MPP's government is very new. People are still saying they are in their honeymoon. But is there a way that we can even find out in 2024 whether the Fix the Country movement is the campaign is going to have an effect in 2024? Because at the end of the day, one, we are not just demanding what is right from government. We are also using it as an opportunity to let citizens understand that whatever government does for you is not a favor. It is something that they are required to do for you because they have told us that they will be able to do that for you. Apart from that, it is also an awakening call to a lot of other non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations and some private entities, how we build alliances during this time. Because a lot of people have issues that they are not able to even talk about. But movements and protests like this actually bring all of us together in building alliances and in also doing what we call the division of labor in the development sector. One, if somebody is working on issues around child labor or child rights, per this protest, there has been a lot of media reportage, on cases of children learning under trees, parents complaining about school fees, the situation of our junior and junior sisters and brothers in the senior high school, how for several years now, almost about 4 or 5 years now as we speak, we do not have any approved curriculum for the school children. And it's only private schools who are using whatever textbooks is available to them to use to teach. So it is not just about yielding physical results, but it goes way beyond that to changing the mindset of people in asking government to do what is right by them, asking government to use their monies judiciously, and putting government on their toes for them to know that they are actually accountable to the people who put them in power. So for protest, the result is huge. Like this one, people actually also build themselves through protest. I have been doing this for God knows what. But there are a host of people I have met who would never have spoken about this on a normal day. But now they are talking about it, and they are talking about it in spaces where initially you might think they will never be able to utter a word. So it is not just about physical development that you see government going to build schools or something, but compelling even this one, the Minister of Finance on a Sunday to come out to have a press briefing with the media at 2 p.m. instead of the 1 p.m. that the Ministry of Information coming out to even issue a press statement on a Sunday shows that, one, we have a results that shows us that when people tell you, government official tells you, when they commit to working and changing our problems for us and making it the best, they actually can, because they know what they are supposed to do. It is just that they are taking citizens for granted and they are not ready to sacrifice more because they think that we are okay with the little that they do. We'll pat them at the back.
Thank you. So Oliver, you were going to say something else. I mean, Bash has said a lot in there. What did you have to add to that that submission?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Anytime Bash finishes speaking, I feel like such a fraud, I must say. I personally, I'm always very apprehensive to define results, and also very, very apprehensive of the word development, because I know the baggage of what development means and the ways in which, because it's such a plural concept and such a vague concept, it's been deployed for various shifting purposes, right? But I think the general theme for me, I am much more about process than result. And it's important for me there's a constant stream of how citizens engage with leaders. I said previously that one of my experiences in having coming to this conversation about how contentious politics can be deployed for good is understanding that those who speak expertise and project expertise do not necessarily have the answers. So I kind of want to I'm committed to a process where people are able to continuously engage and dialogue and express dissent and how they are being led and where they are being led to, and the direction, the lack of definition of those, and that process is important for me. So that's what I am committed to. Now, if, for instance, the person who asked the question is committed to development as the ends of where that process should lead, then it's important they continue to engage the conversation and lead that. And so my commitment is trying to get people to engage and use protest in that in the way of improving the substance of how the leaders are held to account and how they are able to engage with citizens, around public goods.
Great, thank you so much. And I was just thinking, just when both you and Bash were speaking, Bash before you, but I was thinking about particularly when we talk about social change, right? I say this with my friends and we laugh. I always say we want change, but we don't want to change, right? That we always want the society to somehow magically become different from the way it is for good, right? And we all have the right to dream and to fantasize about a better society in all the different ways that we can imagine it. But that what are we really willing to give up for that change to happen? And I think that this is also a very important conversation that very centrally involves this discussion around protest, right? I want us to talk about something we can't finish this conversation without talking about, which is COVID-19, right? So I've heard, particularly in government circles in and around, right? And not that I am in government or around government, but I hear this from the news and from social media, right? Where there's always this conversation that COVID-19 is the reason why there's so much hardship. There's all of these things that these protests are targeting. What is your response to that? And I'll ask Amanda about this too, because this is important, and Dr. Sikanku too. But what is your? I'll start with you, Oliver. What is your view on this assertion that COVID-19 is the reason why things are so bad, and that just give it time, and when the effects of COVID-19 wane, naturally things will be much better? What is your reaction to that?
I think personally, for me, as a person who is committed to process, I would say that let the people engage you on the substance and truth and the truth of those statements, right? It's not something you hand off as platitudes to people whenever they express their frustrations, express personal feelings and grievances, and then you hand it off to them as a shut up token that government can easily deploy whenever it wants to get itself out of a jam or whatever it is. Engage people substantively in the process. Ghanaians increasingly and inherently understand that this is a developing country. I give you an example that Ghana raises in taxes, well, this is pre-COVID-19 figures, about $300 per citizen in taxes. The US raises about $38,000 per citizen in taxes. The ability to mobilize financing and solve problems is a difficult part of the reality of governing, right? And for somebody who is aware of sort of how neoliberal structures are oppressive to developing countries and ability to find financing, and how history and how the global financial systems are set up to oppress developing countries and also to depress the ability to raise revenue. I understand that conversation, but I want more people to be engaged in the process of engaging that conversation and how we find ourselves and push back against the system. So we should avoid throwing these platitudes at people and treat them as if they're people who are not sufficiently able to process them, unless we take a paternalistic approach to them in the way in which their voices matter in these conversations. So that's my sort of sentiment generally around COVID-19 and how we can use it in our body politic to improve.
Thank you, Amanda. If you can hear me, and I know you are still there, right? If you can hear me, what is your reaction to this assertion that it's COVID? It's a reason why all of this stuff is happening. What reaction do you have for that?
I think the kinds of things the Fix the Country campaign is asking for, some are beyond COVID-19. There's the issue of electricity. It was there way before COVID-19. So what excuse do you give for that? I've seen a bash on Bash page issues about pay, wage, and all that. And I think those things are beyond COVID-19. There are certain things that they can use COVID-19 as an excuse, but I think it's about time they sat down, engaged with the Fix the Country campaign, identify the main issues they are asking for, and seek alternatives, because there's not everything that we can actually say, yes, COVID-19 is this, yes, there are issues, there are challenges, but beyond COVID-19, these are issues that existed already. So I don't really think that we should associate everything to COVID-19. We had problems before COVID-19. There was COVID-19, but when you're campaigning, you still made all these promises when you knew that the economy would not be able to contain and sustain a whole lot of things, but you've made them. Now people are holding you accountable. You said you would do this for us. So there was COVID-19 when he promised 88 hospitals, and people are now asking for evidence, delivery, and all that. So I think it's about time government sat down and listened to the issues that they are raising, and how to give substantial responses to them, not just use COVID as an excuse. There are some you can. I think it's also about time that government sometimes owns it and say that, well, I said this, we said this, we are wrong because of this and that. We will not be able to provide this now. Give us another time. I think they tend to forget that people listen. People understand that there are difficulties, there are challenges, just as Oliver said. But then how you go about it. I was discussing this with some friends, and I was like, when this thing started, government could have just come out to say that, okay, we've heard, we're hearing your concerns, we'll do something about it. But being silent about these things, not giving any audience to them, is one of the reasons why it keeps pushing. And then because there's no solution, there's nothing to look at. I think it's time they sat down, what is it that you're asking for? Which ones can we provide immediately? Which one requires time? Where have we gone wrong, and how do we think we're going to solve this? What alternatives do these campaigners and conveners have, and how can we use them? Engage people and find solutions. But I don't think COVID-19 is necessarily like foolproof excuse for some of the issues that they're raising.
Great, thank you. And so, as you were speaking, I was thinking about another question, which I would direct to Dr. Sikanku if you are there. Why is it that governments, not just this one, right? I mean, we've seen this. This is a trend. This is a very regular trend. Governments tend to be so intransigent when it comes to dissent and citizens challenging governments and all of it. Where does this come from? Why do governments do that? What benefits does the government get by simply saying, oh, this is not true, when people are actually living, right, the evidence of what is happening, or that, oh, this is the reason why this is happening, when people know that the reasons are different? Why do successive governments employ these strategies in response to protests? If my question is clear.
Right. I'll try to understand it, but I think you're trying to talk more about government response to these protest movements, and the way government really perceives them, and how they respond to them, and why they respond the way they do. That's if I also understand you correctly. Is that it?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, if you are a government and you are faced with some of these situations, I don't think the right thing to do is to suppress, ignore, or to malign the movement. Because one of the things which can really, really go against you is when the movement is organic and it takes a life on its own. There is absolutely no way you are going to be able to stop it when it takes on a snowball effect and takes on a life on beyond any institutional or structural organization. And it's the same thing about elections. Once a campaign catches fire and it grows from a political campaign into a movement, that is the only way change happens. And that is the only way the public is able to make sure that they determine the agenda. And so I would be careful if I was the government, because, this is a very, very political question, not really media. And so I'm going to look at it from a political communication perspective, trying to bring the media, politics, and communication together. And the point is that if the movement is not legitimate, it will die a natural death. However, if it is, you don't really need any institutional organization. Look at all the successful Spring to the to the Tunisian protest movement, to Egypt, to all the Occupy Wall Street movement, and to all the others that we've known. When you go to Nigeria, they had the rebellion, the massive protest movement, which was really non-violent protest, right? So sometimes these movements take a life on its own. That's the movement in Nigeria. They had a movement for the actualization of the sovereign state of Biafra, and so once they take on their own life, then it means that the ordinary people are going to resonate with it. And I think that probably would be the challenge of the organizers, or that will be something that they from their end will hope to ignite. Look at the Kalipo, the Kalipo thing that took place during the political campaign. I mean, it's a whole different context, but I'm just using it to explain how these things take on their own lives. It's self-perpetuating. And so the previous speaker, I believe, sorry, I missed her name, spoke eloquently about how the issues that the campaign is trying to do go beyond COVID. I'm really surprised that is even a point. I don't think it's really COVID. It's just very real life concerns that Ghanaians have. And I think one of the major things that, the organizers will have their theories, but I think one of the major things that really gives meaning to the campaign or the protest is the whole doomsday thing. And the other issues that she raised, or the other speakers have raised, or the movement has raised. But there are certain things that Ghanaians experience which give life to this movement. And if I were a government, I would not downplay it at all, because these are things that ordinary Ghanaians are experiencing. You remember, that is what happened when the MPP was in opposition and Yvonne Nelson and other people organized the protest. Okay, at that time, I was teaching at the University of Ghana, not GIJ. And so I experienced that protest live because they assembled at the fuel station opposite the UG entrance gate. And so I observed, how they did that mobilization, went on it through the street all the way through the mall. We had civil society joining, you had university professors joining, you had ordinary people joining. They went through the mall, and it was big. I mean, I would say it was one of the things that probably brought down the Mahama regime. And it went viral on Twitter. It was making waves in Nigeria. Some of them were mocking Ghanaians, saying that look at these people protesting electricity in the presence of electricity, and all of that because of the light around the mall area. So the thing is that once you get to that stage where Ghanaians feel as if your government has had a first...
let me interrupt you for one quick second. I apologize sincerely. And because I just got word that Oliver has another interview that he has to run from here to. So I want to give him one final word before he runs up to his interview. And I'll come back to you and so you can finish your thought. I apologize for that. So Oliver, any last words before you leave us? And I apologize for keeping you here longer than you anticipated.
Thanks for that. I appreciate it. I kind of just wanted to use my last words to speak directly to the various people who are looking at this movement and wanting a sense of wanting to believe in this. For me, I have said consistently that one of the things about our partisan politics or politics in Ghana has done over the years is that it has undermined our faith in our voice to bring about change. And I want people to understand that these conversations can only sustain themselves and can only work if people continue to be engaged. We as individuals, people cannot look to us as individuals as the way in which they believe in the moment. I want them to take a leap of faith, and so that this gives it some sort of structure, gives it some sort of durability. And that's all I kind of wanted to stress now before I quickly jump off. But thank you for the opportunity for having me on.
Thank you so much. We do appreciate you coming, and hopefully we'll get to chat again about this. But apologies once again for keeping you here longer. I know Oliver had to leave because he has to go for an interview on a radio station in Ghana. So I want us to respond to one more thing before, because our time is even up. But I want us to respond to one more thing. Let me make sure that we don't have, go back to the questions in here. So Bash is back. So any questions? Let's see. I thought I saw a different question, but let me ask my question. So Bash, this is to you, and of course, other panelists can jump in after that as well. But because you are You are an insider. We've kind of talked about this a little bit. What do you, as an insider, to fix the country? Hashtag fix the country. What do you hope to achieve with, and once again, I'm not asking you to tell me exactly, because you are not God, right? Exactly how this is going to go and how it's going to end, but at least in the minds of the conveners, in the minds of the organizers, what is the where do you hope that this leads?
Well, it varies in terms of one, processes, and also the second one being making government accountable. Because if you do not have a system that works effectively, efficiency is something that you can never achieve. And here is a case in Ghana, the system itself is not working. And I can, like the counter campaign they decided to bring on, fix yourself. I mean, if I'm driving and I decide to be a good driver on the road and the road is not good, how do I become a good driver on the road? To protect other people, other users on the road, you know. So the what we expect to achieve is very broad, because government itself knows what they need to do. That is why they will call us for a meeting and then outline their plans that they've had all these while that they have not been able to implement. And that is why the Minister of Information will go on Twitter to go and tweet about the meeting that was held and assure Ghanaians that we have come to a consensus. That is why they think that they can tell us they want to form an interministerial committee to help them in resolving the issues that have been brought forth. When we have voted for you based on your manifesto and based on the fact that you told us you had plans already put in place, all you needed was the power to kickstart things. That is why the Minister of Finance will sit today on TV stations and start talking about the plans they have ahead. They know what to do. We are only telling them and reminding them that whatever we are asking for as Ghanaians, if we are asking them to fix this country, it is not because we want them to do us a favor. It is our right, and it's not a privilege for them to do this for us, And also to let them understand that Ghanaians have come to the realization that they owe us. We do not owe them. They owe us accountability. They owe us transparency. They owe us efficiency. They owe us every single thing they promised and beyond, because they made an assessment before they came to ask for power. They did a wider consultation when they were putting together their party manifestos, which brought them to power, and which they are using to implement whatever agenda that they have, So it is not in place for us to tell them that give us water, give us this. On daily basis, what did the government campaign on? What did they tell Ghanaians for them to vote for them on? So whatever we seek to achieve, I would say that I have been very much fulfilled since starting this campaign. One, because of the awareness we've been able to create, and the fact that we've whipped government to an extent that the whole government machinery is on its toes as we speak. They do not know what plans we have again, because to them, they felt like once the protest, the injunction was placed on us, it will automatically kill the whole movement, which was wrong. So now they do not know the next steps we have. And from tomorrow, we are going to see more of accountability. Because if the finance minister tells us that I'm going to be in a meeting with the water resource, I'm going to
Looks like, yeah, Bashi's still there. Sorry, you cut off a little bit. Go ahead.
I'm muted, yeah. So are these things that the government expected us to tell them before they do it? Is Doomso something that we needed to be on the government, that how can Doomso be back? And the fact that they are even playing around with words when it comes to Doomso is also something we cannot comprehend with. For instance, how do you tell us that it is not Doomso, but intermittent power shortage or whatever? And then there is a timetable that comes out that says Doomso. You cannot continue to take Ghanaians for granted. Gone are the days when Jamaica was the thing we all believed in because, one, nobody wanted to waste their own time. We thought that demanding for what is due us as a part of the democratic processes, which includes protest and the freedom of speech, freedom of association and all, was time wasting. As we speak, like you also mentioned in your introductory remarks, man is one, a professional. Every one of us is extremely busy. I've had to cut off a lot of things so that I can make enough time for this campaign. It's not like somebody is paying other Ghanaians and also to ensure that government is getting, for instance, didn't we have COVID before? Didn't we have maternal health issues for women, child and maternal mortality? Didn't we have them before COVID came? And on plywood to the hospital before COVID came? Were we not having students studying under trees before COVID? Were we not having serious discussion as a nation on free SHS and how quality it was before COVID? Were we not insisting that government give us a curriculum? The Ministry of Education does it work to approve a curriculum for our students to learn. As we speak currently, except for those who are privileged enough to have enough money to take their children to private schools, public school teachers are only using internet and whatever means is available. Were we not having flooding before COVID came? So whatever the case is, government will always find an excuse. And that excuse is not what we are interested in. If this was the first time this government was coming to power, it would have been a different discussion altogether. This is their 5th year. It's a continuation of the past 4 years they have been in power. What do they have to show for it?
Thank you so much. And if we still have Amanda, any final thoughts? I wanna give me 1 second here. So Bash, is Bash still here? So if Bash is still here,
yes, I'm here.
There was a very important question that I want you to respond to in the comments. Someone asked, how do we join? If people want to join the Fix the Country campaign, protests, how do people get engaged?
Well, you can get engaged if we still have our press statement out there. You can go to our various social media.
It looks like it's still breaking up a little bit here.
Yep.
Sorry, you were breaking up a little bit, Bash. Can you hear me? All right, so let's take some final words from Amanda and Eche. If Bash is able to come back, because we want to be able to respond to that question. How can I join?
Okay.
So as to provide the public with more information for people who want to join. So Amanda, if you are still with us, and I think you are.
Yeah.
Final observations, comments, and then yeah, go ahead.
I think from this discussion, we've come to have a fair idea of some of the issues that the Fix the Country campaign is about. I think these are critical and pertinent issues that need addressing. So for the whole week, I think some of the things that come up when we are talking in our personal spaces is how the message is not clear. So I think I'll urge the conveners of the campaign to highlight the key issues that are of interest that they are pursuing. Probably in a form of, I think this evening I saw Bash doing some of them on placards and share so that people will get to know, okay, these are the issues. These are the things you're asking for. So when they make their posts, they can highlight it and it sends the message across. Where that is going to get a lot of people on board. Because so far, what is sticking in people's minds alone is Fix the Country. But what do we really want fixed and all that is not clear. I also think that It's good. Some people are asking, how do you join in? If you can have critical teams that will help them do their works, like maybe they have an IT team that will create, using some Adobe softwares and all that, create flyers and all this for people for sharing, because then images stick. And I think Bash has started. I think the team needs to move it to a step further. I also hope that they have alternative for us. Okay, if they want to fix it, what can be done? What should they do? What do we want to see? What are the critical things we want to see, measures to know that, okay, this is what we asked for. This is how we think it should be done. And so that in future, we get to know, okay, it's been solved. So government will not just get up and come and do one or two and come and say, okay, this is what you asked for, but we've done that. We should just put points, things that they can hold people accountable for and all that.
Thank you. And do we still have HA? If we still have HA, I want there was a question that I think I wanted quickly for HA to respond to. A question about whether or not it's effective for people to be armchair protesters, right? Is this an effective way of campaigning where, we on social media mostly, right, where hashtag this and we talk about this? I think there's been a perception, right, that stems from a different time, but is this something that is effective when people who don't show up in person, for instance, but would, for instance, use the media, social media particularly, to respond to some of these things?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the point is we live in a technologically deterministic age where a lot of our lives is governed or revolves around the use of technology. And this technology has permeated in every aspect of our lives, including our democratic practices. So it is just one more way in that life works. I mean, social media, technology, and everything, the internet is just part of what modern society is like. And it will really, really be very surprising if protest movements like this do not take advantage of these systems to perpetuate their goals, because that really is what life has become now. So I don't know a lot about, I don't know that this is armchair. We all know what the Arab Spring did in Egypt in bringing down the Hosni Mubarak regime. We saw it live in Khalid when people who worked at Google were able to mobilize using the power of technology, to bring the government down. And so there are a lot of people who are techno-optimists in this age who depend on social networking in order to bring people together. And the power of social media to give life to this movement cannot be underestimated. There's a lot they've done without even meeting at a single place in order to march. And I think it would be very suicidal for people to think that in the absence of physical gatherings or meetings, life cannot go on. I think COVID has taught us way too much to know that there's a whole lot that people can do even remotely and living, not having to meet physically. So I think it will be quite suicidal to just downplay this as some armchair work goes on before you realize, a lot has been done. So I really don't think so. Social media, the intersection between social media, democracy, mobilization, and movement is just too realistic for anybody to think that this is just people sitting somewhere pressing their buttons or playing with their phone. There's just too much power in technology and social media to get this done.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to take opportunity so I want to say something before I close. So this is, to be clear, what Ichi was saying about the Arab Spring and using social media to bring the government down. To be clear, this is not what, at least the sense we get before and even during this conversation, this is not what a Fix the Country protest is about. Nobody wants to bring any government down. That's just to be clear, right? Nobody wants to bring any government down. I don't think it has gotten to that point yet. This is just a democratic accountability kind of conversation that we're trying to have. So I just needed to clarify that it was just an example that I believe Eche was making with the Arab Spring. So this is it's a conversation that I think we can keep having, right? I do appreciate all of the even with the few technological issues that we've had, I believe that this has been a productive conversation, at least to this point. And I think Bash is back. I want to give Bash one last final word because I thought she was gone, but I can see she's back now. Bash, if you can hear me, and if you have any final thoughts before we round up here, I would appreciate that. Can you hear me, Bash?
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, my internet is trying to. Can you hear me, Eric? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. So
Yes.
I think that it is important for us to make this clear to Ghanaians that this is not about me. This is not about my family. This is not about Oliver. It's not about Ifeodor. It's not about any of the team members. It is about us and how accountable we also become.
Looks like we're having those issues again. Can you hear me, Bash?
Generation are suffering, but they have to use our voice. How do we use that voice to win? Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Go
Can
ahead.
you hear me, Eric?
Yes.
Okay. So if this was just about us, the convenience of this campaign, we probably would have stopped it because maybe in some way we might be privileged.
We apologize for these breaks. That's sometimes what happens when you rely on technology. Technology is great when it's working, but when it doesn't, it's not very nice. So this is not any of us fault. This is not Bash's fault. This is not our fault. And so we do apologize for the break. Bash was making a fantastic point here.
Living conditions, and then also in terms of our working conditions. But it is not fair to be comfortable and watch the masses suffer. That is
it's not.
Why we are doing this. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't.
Sincere apologies. It looks like we're still having issues with Bash's connection. Bash, if you can hear me, you are breaking up a lot. So I don't know if we can reconnect.
No matter who you are.
Apologies for that. Bash was making some fantastic points about the general outlook of the Fix the Country protest. And I would really have loved for all of us to hear what she was saying. I heard bits and pieces of it, and I hope that you did too. But to end this conversation, I want to thank all of you for joining us. I really do appreciate your presence and the comments that keep coming in and the questions that you keep posing. I want to once again say a big thank you to our guests as well for taking the time. I know Sundays are difficult, but so we do always appreciate taking the time to come and speak with us about these very important issues, to have these very important conversations. So thank you so much for coming. We will come back next week with our regular schedules, and this is an evolving issue, right? So for instance, when we came in here last week for our regular episode, we didn't know that we were going to do this special episode, right? And we did this because we thought this was important for the national conversation, right? And this is something that is of national interest to millions of people, and that we needed to, particularly if we got the chance to talk with people who have insights into some of these issues. And so we interrupted our normal schedule to bring this special edition to us. So this is what's going to happen, right? That if we find a need to bring another of such conversations, we will not hesitate to do so. And so as things stand, we'll continue with our education series next week, but we'll also keep you updated on what happens. Thank you once again for joining us, and we do appreciate your time. Have a wonderful Sunday and a wonderful week ahead. God bless.